Takes about a minute. Hey, Stephanie, we are live.
Okay, good evening, everyone, to the committee, to the members of the public, and to the applicant team. I'm Stephanie Simone Mahaney, and this is a meeting of the Zoning and Land Use Committee. It is April 15th. This evening, we will have a presentation on a rezoning application for 9305 Fifth Avenue, also Fort Hamilton News. I just wanted to explain first that this is a hybrid meeting, so part of my committee is here in person and the other half is virtual. Likewise, there are members of the public in the room right now, along with the applicant team, and there are also members of the public signed in online. For procedure, we're going to begin with a presentation by the applicant team. First, the committee will have the opportunity to ask questions and make comments, and then we'll open it up to the public. So I would appreciate your patience and cooperation in that. Everyone will be heard this evening, but it does go to committee first. So if we could please start with the applicant team. Paul, I'll let you introduce everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Paul Prue. I'm a land use lawyer. I'm here on behalf of the applicant. We're joined by Yuri Menzak, our talented architect, Nicole Campo from Langen Engineering, and Daniel Grinchman, the applicant. Daniel, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. So just a little context. Very nice to meet all of you. Thank you for coming on this beautiful day. I appreciate you guys taking the time to meet me. We're general contractors and builders, so we also focus on building it ourselves. So every morning you're going to be able to see me there. You're going to see me at the site at 7:30, 8 a.m. We've been doing 3-4 projects a year. We built about 1 million square feet, and we're looking forward to working with you guys on this.
Great. And you can go to the second or third slide, I think.
Sorry.
So this is an applicant, or Daniel's firm, BWH, is the applicant and the developer on this, as you just heard. And they have years of experience building projects across Brooklyn. You can proceed a couple of slides. You see one there. And
Next one.
Yeah. And here's a list. This presentation is available through the community board office if you'd like to examine these details. And we're here to present to you on a site just down the street at the Staples store at the corner of 94th and 5th Avenue, halfway between here and the bridge on 5th Avenue. And we're here to propose a rezoning that is going through ULURP. And go ahead. It's for a zoning map amendment from the existing R6B C23 to R7X C24. This is in the Bay Ridge Special District. We would also be adding to this site a mandatory inclusionary housing designation, meaning anything built there would have to be affordable in part. The development we'd like to build pursuant to those changes involve an 11-story mixed-use commercial and residential building with residential, commercial, 292 dwelling units, 88 income restricted units, and 75 parking spaces. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some deviations from that, but that's the application. Go ahead. So you guys know where it is that we're talking about, I believe. We're not far from here. Go ahead. We've met with your new council member and your old council member to discuss the site and what we think is a great opportunity. You know, the site is underbuilt. Those of you who are familiar with it, you know, it's a typical sort of suburban big box retail kind of thing. It's a Staples. Half the site is its parking lot. And it's a single-story building with windows facing the parking lot. It's, you know, nothing to write home about. The existing zoning in R6B would allow about a 4 or 5-story building. And I'll show you what that looks like. The context nearby is generally about 4 stories. But we think that because of this site's location, in between 2 established retail areas, just north and just south of us, and because of the size of the site, I'll explain, it's a great opportunity to do something more. And that's what we're here to ask your permission for. Go ahead. So there you see it in the neighborhood, outlined in yellow. We're just down the street from the 9201 Fourth Avenue site that you saw within the last 2 months or so, I'd say. Down the street from the Fort Hamilton Public School, kitty corner from the Fort Hamilton Triangle Park, which we take the name of the project from, and where the 4th Avenue and 5th Avenue intersect and 5th Avenue begins. Go ahead. So you see the site here and its parking lot. This is the small opening into the building. Go ahead. Looking towards the bridge, you see on the right some of the neighboring uses. I'll talk a little bit about the zoning across the street, but there's a car wash there and a car dealership, a drive-in Dunkin' Donuts. Go ahead. Here's the more traditional Bay Ridge retail that we're connecting to the south. Pick that up, Barry. Where were we?
Oh, what question else?
Just using the mouse.
Oh,
Okay.
okay. So I want to point out here, this is a land use map showing the different uses nearby. You'll notice across the street, it's primarily commercial. This is the area where the car wash is and the car dealership. It's a C8 zoning district across the street. And you tell me, but I think C8's the worst zoning district.
It's my favorite.
Yeah, okay. Reasonable people can disagree. C8 is a zoning district that mainly allows automobile uses only. So this is where you have like fix it flat kind of places, car dealerships, and gas stations, those kind of things as of right. So I guess I point that out mainly to show that, this is an area that's sort of underdeveloped, and at least in that direction, there are very few people that will be offended by a larger building. I also want to point out that if you look to the southwest at the triangle there, this is a huge intersection. It's a huge open space with a park in between 4th and 5th, which really opens up the space to the visual space that you perceive. And so we often think of that as a good place to put a taller building on account of the fact that it, sort of they even out. Okay.
Thanks.
So this is the way this is the zoning map that we would be modifying. You can go to the next. And this is the building that we could build without any changes. This is an as of right R6B building. So I want to point out to you, that it's 5 stories. I also want to show you here that it's 6 stories on the left. This goes from north to south, it goes downhill, and then from west to east, it goes downhill also. So we have kind of a tricky site with some differing grades.
So with the as of right, how many units would
100 units.
100 units?
Now, because R6B has a 2.0 FAR and commercial is there's no additional square footage you get from commercial. Any sort of commercial space we were to put into this as of right scenario would take away from the residential. And from a business perspective, residential has a much higher return than commercial. And so, it's a little bit of we're not like planning on building this, so we haven't really delved too deeply into it. But the point I'm going to make is that the as of right involves certain sacrifices that we can avoid with the proposal. And we think the proposal will allow for a much more vibrant streetscape with active commercial uses and that sort of thing. And so what you see here is, essentially the way that building would look without any changes. The other thing about the as of right that Nicole may speak on, and that I understand there are some pre-meeting questions about, is the environmental review. The environmental review is the city and state mandated study that determines how the proposed change will impact the environment, right? And that proposed change is the difference between the as of right and the proposed. So we're not studying what is involved with building a residential building here, because a residential building is already allowed. We're studying the difference between the as of right residential building and the proposed residential building. And that increment depending on whether it triggers certain things based on threshold requirements, like, how many units are there? How many feet are there? How many square feet? These things all trigger different studies. And those studies in this case are not triggered. In fact, we're actually in the Green Fast Track program, which is a new city program that allows for somewhat expedited review, but quite frankly, it hasn't saved us that much time. But it's somewhat expedited, and it allows us to cut to the chase and make the decision about the land use as opposed to letting a lengthy environmental review slow the process down. So why make these changes? I mean, that's what we're here about, right? Now that I've sort of set the stage. So this is a strategic location, as I mentioned. It's on that corner with the park, kitty corner. It's a high visibility site anchoring a neighborhood retail corner. This is a spot to build a building that, sticks out in your memory, that doesn't just fade away, right? And I think we've managed to put together a pretty good proposal for that. On top of that, it's near transit. We're right at the end of the subway line, 100 feet away from the entrance. So if you don't have a car, this is a good spot, to set up camp, spend a few years. You can get to the city. Express bus isn't too far away. You've got options. Our retail and community facility program here is going to offer some jobs, not thousands of jobs. This isn't a factory, but it's a pretty good sized non-residential component that we're proposing. And that'll have certain jobs and create certain economic activity. On top of that, the number of units that we're proposing, the expendable income of those families will be spent somewhat in the neighborhood and will, be an injection of vitality into the existing businesses. And then on top of it, the as of right is not an affordable designated site. We don't have to build affordable. There's a tax abatement we could pursue, but affordable is not required. What we're proposing requires affordability. And as many as 88 units would be affordable. And we'll get into the details on that. So here's the site to, kind of demonstrate some of those points I was just making. Again, take notice of the sort of open space kitty corner from our spot. The triangular shaped park and the broad 4th Avenue streetscape there, which is 100 feet wide. And then you'll notice to our east, it's not a large scale neighborhood, but those buildings, which do step down at least 12 feet, are pretty good sized at 5 and 6 stories. Go ahead. So this is what we're proposing. We're proposing to take the R6B C23 in the Bay Ridge Special District and change it to R7X C24. And a sliver of that is also the R5B, which is behind us. And we're also proposing the mandatory inclusionary housing designation, as I've mentioned. Go ahead. This is what it looks like on the map, the existing on the left and the proposed. Go ahead. And this is the designation of the mandatory inclusionary housing area. You'll note the 2021 rezoning on the other side of 92nd Street. 9201 is on the opposite side of that street. So this is a little bit of an area of activity for the neighborhood, right? 3 different rezonings in 5 years. It's a busy intersection. We're proposing MIH option 2, I want to point out, which is 30% of the units set aside at affordability levels of 80% of AMI. We can talk more about those details. Go ahead. And that's, again, MIH is forever. It's not like, for the length of an abatement or anything. That's permanently affordable. This shows some of the differences between R6B and R5B and our proposed R7X. I want to point out to you that the maximum building height in R7X is 145 feet. I also want to point out that it's a 6.0 FAR. And the parking requirements are 15% of dwelling units and 1 per 1,000 for commercial uses. Go ahead. So we're proposing an 11-story building, call that 110 feet. That's 35 feet shorter than, what we could build. We're using all 6.0 FAR. And what you're seeing here for commercial and community facility uses is the zoning square footage. Now I'm pointing all these things out so that I can tell you how the project's going to vary a little bit from these details. This is also showing 75 required subcellar parking spaces. With the city of Yes, the parking requirements are much less onerous, or, the numbers are much lower. So for all of these units, 292 units and another 15,000 square feet of non-residential space, only 75 spaces. Go ahead. But if we look closely at our proposed commercial square footage, this is the gross square feet that you see here. You'll see this is somewhat, it's 28,000, it's just below 30,000 for commercial and just below 20,000 for community facility. And that's because, and I'll go through each floor, you have below grade space and you don't count that for your zoning, okay? But if we're gonna put a 30,000 square foot tenant in there, that's the number they're interested in. And we've got some exciting things to talk about with that. Go ahead. Is there any way to, I'm losing the edges of the presentation. Can you switch the perspective maybe? There we go. Okay, this is a better, this shows the ground floor. And what you see here in the center on Fifth Avenue is the residential entrance. And then on the far right side, on the north side, that's the community facility entrance. And it's just a small entrance because the community facility space, which takes up most of that north side of the building, that's a double height space. And Daniel, as we go through this, maybe you want to talk a little bit about the uses that you have in mind.
So what we've thought about is kind of using our site as a connectivity point for that whole block. If you look at the retail, both across the street and to the left of us, it's suffering. The pizzeria doesn't have as much foot traffic as it used to have decades back. Mentioned that when I was there. The bar across the street is a little bit limited in how many people they have coming. What we want to do is kind of connect the block. Our side of the block is very quiet, with the exception of a couple stores to the right of us. What we're proposing to do here, and what we're in talks with several retail tenants, we have several supermarkets very interested in the space. We have several LOIs from several big name supermarkets. And then for the community facility component, we're thinking about putting in a daycare. I'm a small partner in a daycare business. We already have 11 locations, and we think that a daycare could be a perfect use of this site. We're completely open to different thoughts and different suggestions from your side. If you guys want to see something else, I'm open to hearing it. That's the purpose of this meeting and conversation.
But it's a 20-foot floor-to-floor space with exposed, frontage on Fifth Avenue. So it's going to have windows bringing natural light in. It's going to be a nice space for a daycare or whatever. And then on the corner, you see there's a commercial space, which is about 12,000 square feet at grade. And then there's a loading dock and entrance to the below grade parking on 94th Street. Going to the next slide. And here's the below grade space. So you see another 18,000 square feet commercial and the community facility space. So whether it's a grocery store or whatever, that's a pretty significant sized retail operation. And if you move to the next, then below all that is the parking. And again, I mentioned there are 75 spaces required by zoning. We think it's probably not enough. So what we've proposed here is a mix of attended parking and self-park. You want to go through this, Yuri?
Sure. So the driveway from the 94th Street will take the local traffic down to the subcellar level, where you could have in the center the loading area for the commercial, both of the commercial stores. We have a commercial elevator leading up to both of the levels of the commercial, above at the cellar and the ground level, facing the Fifth Avenue. So people that are would like to come in and shop, they could do the self-park themselves. We have approximately 25 parking spaces, and we have an attendant 130 plus spaces adjacent to it, which will be used for both residences and the commercial if they would like to. But we did want to point out that we try to provide an opportunity for people to do come in and do load themselves from directly the stores into the cars and come out without going for the attendant parking spaces. as well as take into consideration a lot more busier market of deliveries and providing the ability for those delivery bikes or any stores that do Instacart or any other type of shopping for individuals to come in and park in that area and then go into the store and then making delivery on the local level to whoever was requesting.
And if you notice on the bottom of the sheet there, there's another 8 or so reservoir spaces. So 134 plus 25 plus 8.
It's about 157 parking spaces. We could do more. There is an unexcavated area of about 30 to 40 feet on the north side of the lot. We did not go that low from the Fifth Avenue. At that point, we would be about 30 feet below the sidewalk level. So we try to step down as we go over here from the Fifth Avenue towards the 94th Street. It would be possible, but it just.
The way that we drew it up, we think that it's kind of kills two birds with one stone. Number one, we're trying to have as minimal of an impact on the streetscape in terms of vehicular traffic as possible. What we're trying to accomplish here is completely keep all vehicular traffic self-contained in the building, similar to what a Home Depot in Sunset Park has, where it's all in its own parking lot. It does not bother any of the neighboring buildings, neighboring tenants, neighboring anyone. We're trying to keep everything entirely self-contained. Also, what we're trying to do is minimize the construction timeline and make it as quick and painless for the residents around us. The way that Yuri drew it up, there's no underpinning required of the adjacent building, nothing. It's a very simple SOE process. It's quick, easy, painless, and we think we're accomplishing multiple things with one go, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Good. So that's the sort of retail program. And I think the next thing to talk about is the unit count. We've been in contact with your council members for some time, both the original and the more recent council member, and they have provided us with great feedback. One of the things that was communicated, and we heard this recently at the 9201 review, was to do more family-sized units. So we put together here 25, 25, 25.
Approximately a quarter for each type of the apartments here.
So that original slide, our presentation at City Planning is for 292 units. But what you're seeing here is for 252 units. And so that includes 16 3-bedrooms, 19 2-bedrooms, 20 1-bedrooms, and 25 studios that are affordable. And then another 43 3-bedrooms, 39 2-bedrooms, 41 1-bedrooms, and 49 studios market rate. So it's slightly less. And then it's, instead of 88 affordable units, that's 80 affordable units. So just to summarize again, it's 292 and 88 as like that's what we're studying for our environmental. That's what we're proposing at City Planning. But we think that pursuant to the feedback we've received already, assuming you want to echo that, is that family-sized units would be more appropriate. And that will bring the number of units down for the total and for the number of affordable. Another thing that we heard, if you move to the next slide, is that the 14 stories that we had originally drawn up for our environmental review to show what could be developed here was higher than is really appropriate at this location. But that if we could get it down to about 11, that might be something that, is more welcomed. And so we've already taken the step of lowering the height by 3 stories. And we did that and maintained the same amount of square footage by pushing into the backyard a little bit. This is a very unique site. It's 300 feet long and it's 132 feet deep. Now compare that to 9201. That was a 200 foot by 100 foot site, right? That was a big site already. This is 300 by 132. Sorry, that was 200 by 100. Anyways, the point is that we can move some of the density into the back, into those 3 piers that you see there, and still provide adequate light and air for the units, and it doesn't feel too crowded. And that lets us bring some of the height of the building down. So again, we're only proposing 110 feet, not 145. Go ahead. Gary, you want to just talk about the design a little bit?
Sure. So when we approached the massive 300 feet frontage of on the Fifth Avenue, we want to break the scale down and provide number of setbacks in order to have more of a human experience on the street level and without having straight wall up 145 feet in height. So what we did, we broke the building into two parts, mostly one that is in the corner that is going to come out and accommodate commercial usage at the street level. Have a two-story open space right directly below the 3 feet to 4 feet setback area where the commercial is. And from there, we have the base of about 70 feet for the residential floors. At the height of 90 feet, we are stepping back about 15 feet, and that's on the right in the corner. And on the left, at the height of 80 feet, 82 feet approximately, we are stepping back 15 feet as well. So by using of the setbacks, we want to make sure that the building is not sitting directly on the street level. Its step back allows more of light and air into the community, and you have more of a human experience on the street with the local used materials of brick, maybe glass, maybe precast stone panels that we proposing in this case, but we open for suggestions in certain ways, but we trying to make sure that the building is proportionally sitting in the neighborhood without overwhelming the street and the usage.
Mhm.
And here you see the building from the back and the 94th Street frontage.
On the 94th Street, you see the drastic drop in elevation. The grade goes down to about 7 to 8 feet from the corner, and it also goes up along the Fifth Avenue too. The total grade change from the farthest 2 points is approximately 11 feet we're talking about. So that is what allows us to have a commercial cellar level that still would get certain amount of daylight from the street on 94th Street.
Here's the retail corner space.
Continue.
So just to reiterate, this is 88 units of affordable housing, between 80 and 88. This is a retail activation that brings a vibrant pedestrian-friendly ground floor with the residential density above to support retail both in the building and around the neighborhood. This is a community facility space for education, health, or nonprofit use. And this is an improvement to the public realm between the street trees that we'll be adding, the urban design improvement, knitting together the disparate retail strips on the north and the south, and activating the space in between, something different than a parking lot. But at the same time, maintaining ample enclosed parking for both residents and commercial users. Go to the last slide. So that's our proposal. I'm guessing there might be some questions.
Just a
I
few.
think that's
Thank
those are the
you.
details.
Thank you very much. I just want to remind everyone that this is just the first meeting. This is presentation and discussion. There will be a public hearing in May. So there is ample time to, if you have additional questions after this evening. But thank you, Paul, very much, Daniel, for all of the explanation. It was a very thorough presentation. Also, thank you for explaining the green fast track. Just to reiterate, this has been, I think, very confusing for some people to understand that to be eligible for the green fast track, you have to have 250 or fewer units. That is, but you have to look at the increment. So the as of right, the number that would be associated with as of right is only 100 units. And then this, currently the proposal is for 292 units. So that's less than a 250 difference. Before I turn it over to the committee, if I could just clarify a couple of things, please. So the original plan was to use the 140.
I'm sorry, I hit a button.
Oh,
Okay,
hasn't-
it's recorded. It's on
okay.
YouTube. We're good. We're good. I'm sorry.
The original 145 feet, you were at max FAR at that point?
Yes,
Yes, so this, you just adjusted it, came down to 11 stories and you are still at max.
yes, just shaved 3 stories off the top and kind of displaced it to the back of the building.
And there would be no opportunity then for you to go higher if you're,
Well, no, I mean, if we were to buy development rights or something like that, you probably could go higher, but
okay,
it's a split district zoning lot. Barry can tell you that's not really accretive. It's not something we plan to do or would really make sense to do. But you could fill that increment in with square footage. We could change our mind and instead of building an 11-story building, build a 14-story building. That's true. But what we are representing to you is that we are going to build an 11-story building. And Daniel, why don't you?
Basically, to make it short and sweet, what we say we're gonna do is what we're gonna actually do. We're not looking to sell this to somebody right after we rezone it. We're planning to own this for a very, very long time and keep it as our own. We're not looking to make any quick flips here. That's not our business model. That's not who we are, what we do. What we agree to or what we shake hands on is what will be done. I can assure you of that. That's just how we do things, and that's what we intend to do here.
okay, thank you. And just quickly, the area that's just would be zoned the R5B. How many stories is that? Where was that?
Are you asking what is allowed in R5B?
Yes, or on the, just trying to
Do
identify.
you want me to go
where-
back to the slide?
if
Yeah,
it's-
if you go to
We don't have any
21.
frontage of the R5B. We only have
Okay,
the portion of the rear of the 15 to 20 feet in the
Okay.
back.
I just wanted to identify, all
The
right.
frontage is fully within the R6B grant.
So to
Okay.
break it down into zoning speak, we're zoning to the center line, right? But we go 16 feet over the center line. So the 25-foot rule allows us to call that R7X for our purposes, but but we are technically partly in an R5B in the back.
Right, so,
Just because the tax lot and the zoning lot are not exactly.
so were you to build under R6B, you move the R6B into the R5B, and so you produce an R6B building because you can move the line up to
But
25 feet.
let me just make sure. It's all clear. We have frontage only on R6B. The
Okay.
R5B is beyond 50 feet
Right,
beyond
but
the
it's like,
street.
it's one zoning lot, so you would,
Yeah.
well, the R5B, it's really not, we really should not worry about it. It's really not
Okay.
really terribly relevant to what's going on here. It's just, it's a mapping anomaly. The real issue is R6B versus R7X.
Okay.
That's the thing to focus on.
And why is it that you went with the R7X? I mean, this is a massive project.
Yeah.
It will set precedent in the area, and that is a great concern for the community.
Yeah, but we were aware that the folks at 9201 were asking for R8, and we considered that. But we thought that R7X at 6.0 rather than 7.2 FAR was an appropriate density for this location. Again, we wanted to do something bold. We felt like the site deserved something, worthy of its size, its location on the corner, and its, the importance of filling that gap. And we thought the R7X was a good place to land on, both for the amount of height it allows and the density that it allows, for purposes of generating enough return to build a very deep foundation, 3 stories, and, for all the other costs that go into the more ambitious construction project. Do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that in order to do some of the in order to achieve some of the goals that we have in working with you, such as building larger units, putting in more parking, the project still has to be economically feasible. And in order to accommodate all of these various requests, we do need a certain amount of bulk, which R7X allows us to do. So in getting this bulk, we're able to offer certain other things kind of as a trade-off. However, in a different zoning, we wouldn't be able to do that. We wouldn't be able to offer the commercial use, community facility use, and on top of which provide large family style units, because it's no secret. The family style units from an economic standpoint are truthfully not as strong. Smaller units rent for higher price per square foot, and that generates more income and more profitability. So in order to accommodate the larger units, we need more bulk.
So it made sense to us and it made sense to the folks at city planning. And, you kind of come to a consensus after going back and forth a little bit. And that's where we landed.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to turn it over to the committee now. Any questions in the room yet from the committee members? No.
I have a question. Larry.
Where'd that come from?
Where'd that come from?
Hi.
Yeah, we're gonna start inside.
No, so we're gonna start
in the room.
In the room first,
Yeah.
please.
Sit.
Sandy.
What is behind the Staples property now? Are there homes behind that right now?
Yeah, if you turn to one of the visuals, yeah, it's the back of the buildings facing the street behind us. And those are like 5- and 6-story buildings facing Gelston Avenue. I think it's one of the aerial pictures at the beginning. Right now they look out onto a parking lot, and in the as of right, they would be looking out onto a brick wall that would be about 10 to 15 feet tall. And that's like the back of our building, right?
How does a building this size affect those homes behind as far as sunlight, air rights and view and what have you?
Well, in terms of sunlight, right? Most of that's coming from the south. So that's, going into the large yard in between Fifth Avenue and Gelston. And so that's not going to affect their sunlight so much from the morning until like maybe 3 o'clock, when it's hitting the full exposure of our corner, and it will cast a shadow in that direction. So the evening sun will be much less than the parking lot that's there now.
I'd also like to point out that of the 5 adjoining neighbors that we have, 3 of which are large, you can see it there, they're large 6-story apartment buildings. So they're already, kind of without a doubt, casting sunlight over their own backyard. We have one small building directly to our south, but the majority of it is really larger buildings. It's not small single family homes. It's one single family home, and the remainder is apartment buildings.
But would that affect the tenants in those buildings? Obviously now they're looking out to a parking lot, but at least the views unobstructed. Now they're gonna open their windows and look at a brick wall. That may affect how they rent their apartments. It may affect the tenants that are already in there. That's what I'm trying to get at. I mean,
Let's discuss. So in the as of right scenario, right, we're going to build a building that's going to have a 10-foot brick wall going along that property line, because that's like the back of our building, right? And then it'll like kind of set back, right? There'll be a platform, and that'll be like an open space for the residents of the building or mechanical spaces, or it's a roof. And in both the as of right scenario and in the proposed scenario, you've got that condition. And then you've got those piers where the building sticks out in the middle and on the ends. And in between those, there's a large courtyard, right? So above that 1-story kind of platform is quite a bit of room right here, right? And then less room here, here, and here, right? Because it's kind of like a sideways E, right? So as you look this way, you get quite a bit of, you're looking up, but you can see the sky, but I'm thinking that with a few years, there's going to be some ivy growing on that 1-story brick wall. And, we're required by law to have a green roof. So, there's going to be certain sort of treatments that will soften that. But, this is life in New York City. There's going to be, your neighbors are going to build buildings. Whether it's the as of right or the proposed, though, it's kind of the same for our neighbors. Albeit.
They're still gonna have shade, is what you're saying.
Correct.
what's that? We'll get to you. Just
The committee, I'm sorry, the committee
So
goes,
to what you're saying.
Okay, all right. We'll get to you.
Okay, thank you.
no, that's perfectly
But
fine.
just to echo what Paul is saying, between the courtyard and the green space, they're not looking at a brick wall. I want to make that clear.
Sorry, can you put that image up?
Oh, I'll put it on, yeah, okay.
That would be
Because
very
that
helpful, that you
court-
had of the back.
Yeah, exactly. That courtyard allows for a pretty decent amount of sunlight. It's not that they're staring at a brick wall like those funny pictures you see of Manhattan apartments. That's not the case here. They're gonna be looking at what amounts to, in my mind, a public park almost.
This is the-
Because
this
it's
is
gonna be
the-
highly amenitized building with green.
It was one that he showed from the
Yeah.
back.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's as of right, that where's the proposed?
Slide 28.
I can't see the numbers on this. Oh, here they are. Here's the numbers. Okay.
There we go.
Yeah,
Stop right there.
Right.
That's the proposal.
So if you look at the building on the right, that's the back, right?
Okay.
And so you have those three piers that I mentioned with the courtyards in the middle. And you have the single story sort of brick wall on the back of that. And that's, the back of our retail space. And, on the south side, it's part of the parking entrance. And so that single story is going to be the property line. That's what people will open their back door and walk into their backyard, and that will be there. But again, there's a good, 15 feet in the center pier and on the
We have about 60 feet in between the piers and about 40 feet setback to create the court by 60 by 40.
60 by 40.
With
So
two large openings in between.
it's not a parking lot, but it's not like,
60 by 40 is like almost like a small property in New York. So it's a generous amount of sunlight that's gonna come from these landscape courtyards.
It's
Yeah, I
also
mean,
gonna benefit your residents, because otherwise they'd be up, the lower floors would be up against a building.
100%.
You answered, okay.
Ralph, did you-
Nice.
Oh,
I did have,
okay.
yeah, I have a couple of questions, if that's okay.
Yes.
Fine, please.
Did you say you were doing this as design build? Did I understand that?
No,
No,
I think that was a miscommunication.
okay. I'm concerned about the retaining wall that's back there, because it's not really in great shape. And it sounds like you're going down 2 stories. So how are you doing that without any shoring or anything?
No, so short.
And how is that gonna affect the neighbor's property? Because if you're going down 2 stories, that's pretty deep.
In the location where the north point of the site, where we on the Fifth Avenue, the high portion, we're going about 16,
So north
17
is
feet.
that,
Yeah,
right?
is the one on the right side. It is the highest point. At the highest point, we have a step down to create 3 levels. So the highest step, it will require some shoring. He might have misspoke about it, but
Okay.
yes, it will require shoring in order to accommodate the community facility space.
So it will require shoring in the sense that you're gonna need eight soldier piles and wooden lagging. But we're not gonna be doing anything complicated such as underpinning secant walls. That's what I meant to say. We don't have some complicated
Okay.
scenario that's gonna draw out this foundation for 8 months, 9 months. There's nothing like that here.
But how do you protect the neighbor's property? Because they're right up against that. If you have to go down
Soldier
2
pile.
floors,
Soldier.
right, you're going down to.
Soldier piles, it's very common and very easy to do.
Soldier piles very good and then allowing you.
you guys want to, for the audience, you want to explain soldier piles?
Yeah, that would, right.
So soldier piles are effectively drilled down into the soil. And then what's done is wooden lagging is put in between them to hold the soil to hold that property and the soil from where it is in place. And it's a fairly common, it's used pretty much everywhere. I'm doing it, I just did it on 2 jobs, one in Bed-Stuy and another one in Rego Park.
Mhm.
It's common, it's quick, it's easy, and it's truthfully the safest and easiest.
Okay, and the retaining wall that's there, pretty terribly built.
So
Are you removing that?
Yes.
Yeah, you are, 100%.
And you're rebuilding.
Correct.
everything
Rebuilding,
so As
100%
part of
built.
your foundation.
100%, so it'll be stronger than what it is right now.
Okay, it's really in terrible shape.
No, we'll have a full, the brick wall that goes up north and then west of it,
Mhm.
it encompasses 100% of the lot, property line, so it will be on the property line.
Okay,
Thank you, Ralph. We can go to committee, virtual committee. I don't,
Uh,
what?
uh,
Oh, Anne had her hand.
Anne, and then Doris?
Anne?
Yes, hi. Is it my turn?
Yes.
It seems like an impressive scale. That's just why does it need to be so high in this neighborhood? It strikes me. It's formidable. The other thing is when you mentioned because of the scope of this project, it was the fast green, did you say?
The
Green
green
fast
fast track.
The green fast track, yes, which bypasses doing an environmental review or study. Which I think for something this massive, there should be an environmental impact study because of the nature of this project. And I was like Googling, I was like 245 apartments can house up to 700 people or more. Plus then you have retail space that is coming in underneath. So, and that is a huge influx of burden in the community, especially on local resources, especially with like the way this neighborhood is, it's always flooding. And it has a history of flooding and it will continue to be such. Now you're adding in up to close to 1,000 people. And that area, as much as you say it's very big, it is not. That corridor is actually very congested on a regular basis. And the way it's designed as it is. So when you're saying that you're building substantial underground parking, that's actually not enough parking. And then if there's mixed use with retail, if let's say there's a supermarket with deliveries, even Fourth Avenue, which is quite substantial, has trucks that are parking 2 and 3, and it gets very congested up there as well. This is a narrow corridor. And then when the Verrazano Bridge shuts down, which it does, all that traffic backs up onto the local roads. So an environmental impact study would definitely be required for something of this scale. I don't even know why you need to build so high, number one.
Okay, thank you,
Thank you,
Anne.
Anne.
So I would just clarify that, and I don't know if this, helps assuage any concerns, but there was, preliminary environmental review done for this project. So again, it's based on comparing what could be built as of right, which means you just go to the Department of Buildings, follow your plans and proceed with the existing zoning. And, in the slideshow earlier on, right, there's an image of what type of building could be built just as of right, just by going to the Department of Buildings tomorrow and filing versus what's before you today. So what was looked at was the difference between, again, and I know we said this, but I'm just reiterating, the difference between that building that could be filed tomorrow versus the type of building that could be built based on this proposed rezoning. So it's not to say there won't be changes. Of course, there's a difference between, the two buildings there, and it's hard conceptually, I think, sometimes to understand because your brain wants to think of a Staples store and a parking lot versus an 11-story building. And so, it's kind of like reminding yourself that it's the building that could be built as of right now versus that building. And so that change, for the neighborhood, it's not a neighborhood wide rezoning, so it was disclosed and, but it doesn't, it's not going to require a new school to be built. It's not going to require a new entrance to the subway. It's not going to require, major things that a larger environmental review would often result in. So that's why there are these criteria for green fast track, that it's not saying there's not going to be any change, but that it's not significant enough to continue on with a further detailed study of certain subject areas that may result in like recommendations such as what I just mentioned.
If I could also reference the comment about flooding. Right now, when it rains, and we get these torrential rains these days, right? It goes on our roof of the stables and it goes in the parking lot. And it all just goes into the sewer all at once. Our proposal, on the other hand, you want to go into?
I can also just give. So stormwater rules, unless you're in this industry, you may not know this, but the city's stormwater retention rules for individual properties drastically changed in 2022. So approximately 4 years ago, not even. So before 2022, only projects of a certain size, which was a very large size, were required to keep their stormwater retained on site in the event of large, rain events. And then what happens is like they're retained on site and retention bins and then slowly, you know, kind of let out into the city stormwater sewers, as opposed to like just immediately going. And that's what causes the flooding, is everything's going immediately into the stormwater sewers. So every new site that is built post 2022 is required to submit what is referred to as a SWIP, Stormwater Protection Plan. And what that does is show how, based on how much you are building, how you are going to retain that stormwater on site, you know, kind of absorb it into the site, so that whatever rain is falling within that block or whatever, that lot is being kept on that lot and slowly going. So it's from a stormwater perspective, every time there is a new building built, it's actually better overall for the neighborhood, in the sense that each new development has to maintain stormwater in a very different way than anything built before 2022. So, I mean, Yuri can speak to the specifics of this site, but I just wanted to give some background about stormwater. And this is, of course, like a direct response to what's happening in certain neighborhoods when there are stormwater events. And then, of course, on this site, it's a Staples and it's a fully asphalt parking lot. Like the rain has nowhere to go. So
At the street.
except the street, and yeah.
Right. And on our proposed building, we plan to have about 16 to 18,000 square feet of the green roof, which will allow for temporary water retention from 3 to 4 inches on the blue roof assembly, and also a series of detention tanks at the subcellar level, which will build up the amount of flash flood or stormwater coming in for the temporary basis for about half an hour, 40 minutes or an hour, until it fills up, the flash flood passes. It's not a long-term event. Usually flash flood comes in the increments of half an hour, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and then passes. Any type of system that could retain on a temporary basis the water is what is required at this time. So you hold it and you slowly release into the system as it with a much smaller orifice discharge for the detention tank. But green roof retention plus the detention system in the subcellar will basically, at this point, DEP requires the decrease of close to 90% of the water discharge into the street and holding it back on the property and slowly releasing the flow. And yeah, as of 2022, everything changed in reference to the stormwater management.
Yeah, I'm Barry Dennison, I'm working with Board 10 here. It's very helpful. And what you're saying basically is that this project will not make stormwater any worse and probably will make it better at this site.
Yes.
And that's helpful.
Yes.
What about sanitary sewers? What about people complain about sanitary sewers backing up in the neighborhood? How will this project affect that? What's going on with sanitary sewers in this neighborhood? Why do people have problems? Please explain.
I would say to you, unless Yuri can answer that off the top of his head, I will get back to you, because I can take this back to our engineers, but I don't have that information off the top of my head.
Yeah, and I think for people in terms of environmental review, and they should have done an environmental review, that whether they should have or shouldn't have done it, that is not really before us. That was decided by the cities how to do it. They don't have to do it. The rules have changed, but that doesn't change certain key issues that the community clearly is worried about, one of which is sanitary sewers, the other is obviously traffic. And the thing I will say is that a 30,000 square foot supermarket, which was what you're talking about, will generate a lot of cars. And, you know, I've spent a whole career trying to get supermarkets into neighborhoods in Brooklyn. I really want to see supermarkets happen. But I'm not really clear how this street, along with this building, handles the amount of cars that are going to come into the neighborhood. And again, if you can look at it and sort of show us, oh, no, it's going to work, that would be helpful, as opposed to just saying, don't worry about it.
I mean, I would say, you know, for the purposes of just envisioning the site, right, we tried to anticipate uses that would be received well by a community such as this in Brooklyn, right? Like I know from personal experience, like finding a good daycare is difficult. For those who don't know, daycares have to be on the ground floor and have access to natural light and outdoor space. So you can't put daycares on 4th floor or 2nd floor or whatever. So that was one idea, was the daycare, and then supermarket, you know, everybody wants food. But if there is another use that you think that the neighborhood needs that would be better here, that would have less, you know, give folks less
Yeah,
concern.
I don't think we're saying it
No.
doesn't work. We're just saying,
Okay.
show us that you can make it work.
Okay,
So Barry, to your point, number one, from the perspective of the development, you know, just as hard as much as anyone, supermarkets are incredibly hard to accommodate, both from a ceiling height perspective, column spacing perspective. So it really only works in a building of something that we're suggesting. Now, in order to accommodate it, what we're proposing is an entirely self-contained parking lot. What do we mean by that? We want it to almost be like it's kind of an interesting example, but we want it to almost be like when you go to a mall and they have a parking lot. You don't feel it on the streetscape because the car pulls in and it stays inside. You don't see it. There's no vehicular traffic from an outside perspective. We have a loading bay on a quieter street that will be implemented and used for actual loading and unloading. A major supermarket doesn't do this. It's not like a mom and pop operation. They don't do it at 2 p.m., 3 p.m. They're systematic in their approach. They're going to do it every morning at 4 a.m. They're going to be in and out. They know what they're doing. From the parking perspective, it's going to be entirely self-contained. We will offer attendant parking and we will have self-parking for residents, for the residential. How it gets split up, I mean, that's a nuance that we're going to figure out, but the plan to accommodate the supermarket and ultimately appease the parking concerns is to have the attendant parking in the basement and to have a loading for people who are shopping in the basement. That's the plan that we have. Again, the site is 39,000 square feet. It's incredibly long. You don't see stuff like this in Brooklyn. It's very unique in its characteristics. And that's what we're trying to kind of use.
I think it would be helpful if you actually could show graphically how the cars go in, how the cars go out. You know, in my career, I saw lots of parking lots or these plans where great parking lot, easy enough to get in, but you could never get out. So, and then looking at how you're showing, and again, this is all illustrative. So at the end of the day, you may do something different. The amount of space for cars to queue to get ascended parking, 8 cars, again, a very large store, residents.
That's why you have an attendant parking. You have a choice. If there is availability for the self-park, you do. Otherwise, you use attendant and you go
Yeah.
shopping.
I think what you're saying is just like graphically seeing that
that's a
will
good
have
idea.
people sort of
How
like,
people are
okay,
coming in, how people are
visualize
coming
and
out.
understand
Having
how
the
it works.
graphics to be actually show people
Sure. we
this
could
is
do
going
that.
to work.
Yeah.
Would make people a lot more comfortable than just sort of looking at it. And I'm sorry, a lot of the graphics are, you know, very technical, and you know, people here are not really technical. They need to really see things visually and be able to understand what's going.
I think you would also have to add other layers, in addition to that, like if you're talking about a daycare, that's a very different drop off and pickup situation. If you were to add that, and additionally, that's a bus route. And that bus barely moves as it is. That's, you know, it goes back and forth. It's a very narrow street. So if you were to add all of those layers, it would be wonderful to see how it all interacts.
Absolutely.
We have about 4,
Okay, I have
Doris.
Yes, thank you. I have to say, calling this the Fort Hamilton Muse is an incredible misnomer. A muse is a group of small townhouses with common grounds. It's not a massive apartment building. And I want to reinforce what is being said about the surrounding streets, 5th Avenue and 94th Street, cannot handle the amount of traffic that will be involved with this facility. It's as it was just stated, 5th Avenue is a bus route. There's a century-old firehouse there that needs room, and 94th Street cannot handle the amount of traffic that you will be putting in that parking lot. And then I'm just curious, you're doing 2 underground levels. How deep will that be?
The grade changes from the Fifth Avenue at the north side down to the lowest point on 94th Street of approximately 11 to 12 feet. And at the lowest point from 94th Street, we are going about 12 feet underground. And we're stepping out to about 20 feet excavation at the highest point on the Fifth Avenue.
But you said you're having 2 levels underneath for parking, and how can you have
And
2
a
levels?
Sub-cellar for the commercial. Oh, excuse me. Sub-cellar parking level, cellar for the commercial, and the ground level commercial use.
Or below ground level are the cellar and the sub-cellar
Correct,
combined.
combined.
I think you got cut off. I think you
How far are they?
How many feet below the ground?
So, depending on where we're measuring, if we're measuring from the corner of the Fifth Avenue and 94th Street, we're going about 20 feet in depth.
And you can get a sub-cellar and a cellar in 20 feet?
Yes.
Okay.
But again, Doris, we are sloping down further along the 94th Street, so the excavation decreases as you go down the 94th.
Meaning some of what is underground in one part of the site is not as underground in the other part of the site because of the change in slope.
In the next presentation, I would like to see some visuals of the elevation levels. It would be very helpful, and what
We could-
impact going deep will have on the
Sure.
surrounding houses. And,
Sure, we could do that.
and you describe the area by Fort Hamilton, by the triangle, as this open space. It happens to be a very difficult space because it's where 4th Avenue and 5th Avenue merge. Several streets, they're not through streets, they change direction. It's a very complicated intersection, and to add a huge amount of additional traffic will be devastating in that area.
Thank you,
Oh,
Doris.
yes, I don't know, Anne, if that was from before, if you had one other, we have a few hands in the attendee room as well that we're gonna get to.
Yeah.
No, okay, thank you. So do you want to start
Ralph
with,
has
oh, Ralph, yes.
I just want to go back to the stormwater. So I appreciate what you're doing with the green roof and all that, but what happens during construction? When you don't have the roof there and you don't have the retention tanks and we have a storm, the neighbors are gonna get flooded.
No, you do.
So how are you gonna prevent that from happening?
Local
Because the
dewatering.
Construction's gonna be a long period.
Yeah, but local dewatering is a very easy solution for that during construction. We do it on active sites right now. We have no issues with the neighbors. Generally speaking, and I know this is hard to believe because it's, oh, there's a big building coming next door. It's only gonna make things worse. Generally speaking, the construction process is an annoyance. I've lived next to construction sites. It's not pleasant, but the overall grand scheme of things, it ends up leaving the surrounding neighbors better off because you're looking at crumbling infrastructure from the Staples that's been sitting there for God knows how long. It's an antiquated site and an antiquated use. It serves no benefit other than selling paper, for instance, but that can be done on the ground floor of our new building. What we're proposing here is what we think is a highly contextual in the sense that you have across the street, auto body shops and commercial uses. This residential building gives you and affords you the optionality and the lifestyle of downsizing from a home in Bay Ridge. That doesn't exist today. Today, if someone's son or daughter or grandchild wants to live in Bay Ridge, they have to go into an old co-op and pay top market rents that you can afford to live in other parts of Brooklyn. There are no good new building options in Bay Ridge right now. So I think that this proposal, yes, it's a big building. There's no question about it. But it's a 39,000 square foot lot. It's a big building if we do the as of right play. So in order to try and work with you and try and give you a really good product and give you what we're promising. I know that me saying, oh, it's gonna have parking downstairs. No, it is gonna have parking downstairs and it's gonna work. I can assure you of that. That's what we're asking for the zoning bump for in order to do this. But it serves me also because the building is gonna run better. The residents are gonna be happier. Why would I want crummy parking in the basement? So all of these things, I agree, it sounds scary, but the neighborhood and the area will be the better off after this. I can assure you of that.
That's a co-op example, you can also put on a wait list for a parking spot for like 10
Yeah.
years. Even after you pay for the photo.
So, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it'll be better, but what happens during construction?
You want to
Like
explain
here,
local dewatering?
this foundation's.
So local
And flooding is a really big issue for the neighbors.
So local
There
dewatering.
has to be some kind of stormwater management that I think we'd like to see as part of the proposal
So local
during construction.
dewatering, and Nicole can also
Do one,
speak to
do
this.
like one and one.
It's basically the concept of, let's just say that there's rainfall and we see that an area is flooding, right?
Right.
We take a pump and we pump it into various other parts of the site in order to avoid the flood.
Right.
Very simple, very quick, very easy, works every time. And it's gonna benefit our neighbors because they're not gonna have that torrential water coming down the slope and going into that backyard. Because we're gonna have effectively a big hole and we're gonna have several other holes, and that's where we're gonna pump water into in different sites. But we have a 39,000 square foot site. It's humongous. There's gonna be plenty of space for us to pump water into. That's the
water from the
okay.
neighbors will go in.
go into ours.
Yeah, well,
It's fine. We're ready for
but
it.
it would be good to see that as part of the proposal, that there's some kind of
Sure.
attention
plan.
to stormwater.
We're gonna move to questions from the public. We'll take one first from online.
Okay, Diane Corrigan, you first here. Diane, you should be able to unmute.
Yes. Hi, thank you so much. I have a few questions. Number one, District 20 has been historically an overcrowded district. We don't have enough seats for our students. We definitely do not have enough seats for our special ed students that are in District 75 as well. And I don't understand how bringing almost 1,000 people into one building doesn't warrant a new school, much less how our 100+ year sewers are going to handle it. That's the first part. The second part is you're telling us that you're having this supermarket and they're going to be doing deliveries at 4 a.m. I drive to work in the morning. I drive through Sunset Park. There is no supermarket getting deliveries at 4 a.m. I'm driving through at 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning. The streets are all congested with the deliveries to these supermarkets. And not only is it the bus route, as previously mentioned, we also have our firehouse there. There's no way that they're going to be able to get in and out with all that congestion, especially when the bridge has issues.
Okay, thank you,
Furthermore,
Diane.
there's one other thing. When it rains, Gelston always floods. And then we have the park. The park is overrun with rats, and it's been overrun with rats for years. So how is this construction going to affect that too?
Okay, thank you, Diane.
Thank you.
There's a lot going into those several questions. I think working backwards, Daniel, you want to speak about the park?
Yeah, so another thing that we were planning on doing and we would like to discuss with you guys is Paul and I have obviously frequented the site, we frequented the local establishments, and we think that that park needs a bit of a facelift. I think from hearing from the community's thoughts and, they said that there's a homeless issue there. The park itself kind of has kind of negative effect on the area almost because of its kind of downtroddenness. The steel railings are outdated, the plants are dead, the trees are dead. So what we were thinking of doing was kind of giving it a cosmetic facelift, so to speak. Nothing crazy, just putting in new trees, putting in some plants and painting the railings. But we think that that will have just a huge effect on that one plot by itself, and it will lead to obviously a lot less rats because there won't be garbage sitting around everywhere there.
Okay.
So we've reached out to parks and they have a adopt a park program, and so we have a forester coming out to
Okay.
look at a scope of work, gonna put some trees in existing tree pits, prune an old tree, paint the flagpole, and it's like $25,000 worth of work. It's a 1-year commitment, and if it needs more, we'll come back in the following year, but we should have that sorted out shortly. Going back to the other points, Nicole, you want to address the schools point?
Yeah, I mean, the way the city identify, assumes how many students are coming from how many units depends on the unit size. So for example, typically they're not gonna assume, many children are, I shouldn't say resulting from, but are like living in studio apartments. So the way the city calculates anticipated students is based on not only the number of units, but the type of units. So, from the school construction authority's perspective, this one building does not merit further study. That being said, and I do not work for the school construction authority and I cannot speak on their behalf, but from having worked on, projects like this before, they are regularly on an annual basis assessing how many students are in each school and how many seats are left and whether more space needs to be acquired, vice versa. So regardless of this project, the school construction authority is regularly analyzing how many, children are in the seats and what the needs
And
are.
it's never enough and it's never fast enough, right? I mean, that's just the city of New York. But we're proposing 53-bedroom apartments. And those are family apartments. And those families mean kids going to schools, right? So, I mean, would you prefer to see studios? I mean, I think we've got a nice blend, and I think that, the impact will eventually be dealt with by the school construction authority in due time. It's
Of
just,
course, there's another new building going up 2 blocks away, so those numbers are gonna jump, but.
Okay, do you want to take?
I'd like to take a question from the room if, please, go
I
ahead.
have a couple questions, actually, can you talk about the displacement risk? Because when I look online and read the proposal, there's a displacement risk is like intermediately high for Bay Ridge, like, should this get? Like, that's one question, I think you want me to give you both now, or you wanna speak to that first?
go ahead while I think about that one.
Okay, 2, I appreciate that you said you can assure us, but I can assure you, I could sell you the Brooklyn Bridge for $1. Like, so.
100%.
Right, okay. Where did you get the data about the traffic patterns that are happening here? I know this is a big piece of property, but if I was living here, I grew up here my entire life. If I was the developer, I would not buy that piece of property to do what you want to do. I appreciate everything, what you're suggesting and how it could help the neighborhood, but this is a smaller neighborhood. I don't think anybody in Bay Ridge is trying to get Bay Ridge to be Manhattan. If we wanted that, we'd all be living there. But if I were a developer, I wouldn't have touched that piece of property because of the school right there, because of the Verrazano Bridge, knowing all the problems that are there, the firehouse being right there. It's hard enough for them now to get in and out to do what they have to do. So creating this, while it could do a lot of great things in another area, that particular spot, it's just not optimal, not for the scope that you want to do.
So
I can see what your original proposal about maybe a lower, whatever, 6-level building, that could probably work, but the scale of what you want to do, I just don't think, for so many reasons, and some reasons that other people here already mentioned, it might not work.
About the supermarket, it might work. I'm just saying, the supermarket, it seems to be a big issue with that because of the traffic.
It's the traffic and the schools, and every time there's a problem on the bridge, and the streets are too narrow, and the street coming off of Gelston Avenue is a one-way, not a two-way. It's just, I just don't think it's gonna work. And I appreciate all the thought that's gone in it, but I just don't think it's going to work for the neighborhood in that way. And I don't know if any of you have live in Bay Ridge or grew up in Bay Ridge, but if you did, you would know like which streets are like, oh, this is a great street to have an apartment building, and this is like, I've never built a street on that. So
I'm in and out of Bay Ridge a lot. I do not live here, and I am aware that if you are driving a car in Bay Ridge and you like get a good parking spot, you don't ever want to go anywhere ever again because you don't want to lose that park. Right? So when I try to think of this project from a local perspective and knowing that there aren't a lot of garages in the area, that everything is like a cost benefit, like at minimum with the proposed building, there are proper parking spaces that if you were, a nearby resident or a resident of the particular building, because sometimes you can rent, spaces in a building that you're not living in, depending on how everything is structured, like at least there are more spaces available. Because, Bay Ridge is like an end of the line neighborhood, right? So it's like, yes, you can walk and take the train and walk and take a bus, but you're also like inconveniently located enough to also kind of need a car and, get to other parts of Brooklyn. It's not as easy, right, without the car. So, I mean, that's my thoughts on that. In terms
but I
of
think
traffic,
though is like,
yeah, the traffic
you got enough
study.
data. Did you study? Yeah.
Right,
like,
so
do
that's
some kind of
where I was gonna, like, now it's taking off my Brooklyn hat, right, just like this technical response, again. What the city requires is for us to look at what could be built without this discretionary approval versus what could be built with the discretionary approval. And the difference between the two buildings, right, is not significant enough to warrant a full-blown traffic study. So in that sense, there is not a full-blown traffic study of the area.
Okay.
I have notes here about the graphics that folks have requested, but there is not a full-blown traffic study of the area, as part of this project.
When it happened.
With regard to the first part of your question on the displacement, I'm not familiar with the conclusions that you're referencing.
It was
But-
on the website. I took a screenshot. If you want to see it, I'll show you the screenshot.
Alright.
But I just wanted you guys to speak more to it, because I would want to know, why did Bay Ridge fall in an intermediate, displacement risk if this building were to be built?
Yeah, again, I can't speak to that, I don't know, but we can talk offline and gladly look at your source. But I would just say that, the direct displacement here is zero, because, no one lives here, this is a status. We're not gonna get rid of a,
That's correct.
but, so I think what you're referring to then is that the idea that the new building will somehow have an effect that causes like gentrification, that would then create displacement. And, that's possible, but I think that when you look at the average AMI that we're dealing with in New York and market rates, and then the, 80 to 88 units of a fixed affordable level, there's quite a few benefits that go along with that too. So, Bay Ridge is a populated area, this is gonna be just one building and amongst many. And, it's gonna be one of the only new construction buildings, so it's gonna have a different profile than, say, a co-op that was built 50 years ago, or, an older rental building. But, I think there's room in the marketplace, and there's room, in the people that want to be here, for a wide variety of products that way.
I'm just kidding.
Let's talk after on here.
Quick question, do you know if Green Fast Track had not been implemented, would the traffic situation have triggered a study? Would this project have triggered a traffic study?
I don't think so, but I would have to.
It really is in increment. It's like,
Traffic studies are typically for like a neighborhood changing project. Or, well, this isn't, I mean, but this, I know from your perspective, but I mean, it's not,
It is.
okay.
It's not our perspective.
We live here. I'm trying to speak like technical speak, we're not rezoning a neighborhood, you know what I mean, or,
If this-
so I
if this
can
were like
get,
a
long story
manufacturing
short, I
site-
can get back to you on the technically accurate answer.
Because this is
to
most
the traffic
definitely
study
out of context.
question.
And I know we keep coming back to this, that nothing can be done because the city has already implemented this. But the reality is very different to what the neighborhood would be experiencing. And you keep saying this is only a small area. I don't want to say small, one area that's being the request to rezone. This has consequences, and there are many other only one area here and there being rezoned. And this is very much out of context, and it does set precedent for the rest of the district. And that is the overwhelming concern here. But you had a question? Lisa?
I live on 94th Street, literally right across the street where you're proposing it to go up. Assuming that the parking from 94th and 5th probably down to Gelston will now be a loading zone, so that parking will be gone, or in and out traffic of the parking garage, because that's all parking right now. And I'm assuming that in order to accommodate trucks coming in and delivering and making that a loading zone, people wouldn't be parked there.
There's gonna be two curb cuts, one for the loading bay, one for the garage.
That doesn't exist right
No.
now. Like, that's all.
But you have one,
For the-
but right now you have it on frontage, on Fifth, that will not exist anymore. You have a.
So the parking
curb.
on Fifth will all be regular.
Yeah.
Yes, there's no.
Okay, all right. Also, just thinking out loud, and I know we're keep going back to the supermarket here, but if there's going to be tractor trailers, the idea, anyone who has gone up 94th.
Yeah.
The idea of a tractor trailer delivering to a supermarket would block the street.
So supermarket is an idea that we heard from
I get it.
most people in the area. If that's not something that you guys are interested in, we can look at different options. That's not something that we are tied to in any way, shape, or form. It's just, we heard from the majority of the people that we spoke to that are, residents just like yourself, and they said the overwhelming thing that they need is just as an example, a Trader Joe's or a Lidl. That's like the going joke. I don't know why. So that's that's what we've been told time and time again.
Noted.
So we're trying to accommodate that. If you think that the negatives outweigh the benefits, then we're open to hearing other options. I mean, that's what the purpose of this. What do you guys want in the neighborhood? That's why we're here.
Not another supermarket, that's for sure. I don't know if you're aware, but I'm sure you are. You guys are the first, the Century 21, which is the entire block of 86th Street, has been purchased to create a supermarket. So why would we want another giant
87th
supermarket
Street.
just a
We'll
few
go-
blocks away in an area where there's schools and buses, it's not even just the foot, not foot traffic, the car traffic, but just to take into consideration, there's all these school buses that are always blocking traffic because we've got school a block away. And then you also have all the Staten Island bus route and the Fifth Avenue bus. So it's not just impacting that few block radius. It actually will impact a lot in terms of.
Understood. Again, the supermarket is not something we have set in stone. The idea of a supermarket is just something we were thinking about. If there's no need for a supermarket, then there's no
Because
supermarket.
there is Food Town down the block.
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
And the new building that's going up the block also has a super.
I just want to go to questions online, just trying to accommodate both virtual and in person.
Okay, Vincent Gentili has a question. You should be able to unmute now.
Yes. I want to first thank Chair Stephanie for another excellent zoning committee meeting. I think that the presenters have made the argument for me in how inappropriate this project is. For example, the developer called the presenter called this an underdeveloped area. And they want to do something that sticks out in our memory. Well, it's intentional based on our zoning that this was underdeveloped. And your proposal will actually flip it on its head, and that will stick out in our community, in our memory. So we really have to step back and see the enormity of the overall proposal that's being put forth tonight. and think about the contextual precautions that CB10 has worked so hard over the years to maintain for the community. The zoning precautions, the goal was to control the density and the bulk of the neighborhood to keep some sense of ambiance and contextual small sense of Bay Ridge. And that's been the history of this neighborhood. Now, and when CB10 did the rezoning, that area is now R6B. And R6B under today's framework, with the additions that have been made with the City of Yes amendments, actually gives a developer 25% more in FAR than the R6B that we initially wanted there at that location. So the R6B today is 25% more FAR than it would be without these City of Yes amendments. So my suggestion is to the developers to take the extra 25% that you're being given by the City of New York in FAR under R6B and do what you can with that. But instead, what these developers are asking us to approve is to increase the FAR from 2.0 to 6.0. That's triple an FAR. And that will have a serious impact on the streetscape of Bay Ridge in that area, particularly in that area, but overall. They said that increasing the vibrancy of the streetscape is something they want to do. That's nice. That's nice. You want to increase the vibrancy of the streetscape is nice. But compared to the enormity of the scope of the project you're proposing, we can increase the vibrancy of the streetscape on our own. It doesn't equate. It doesn't equate at all. And I think by having this project go forward and built in this neighborhood would set a new and dangerous precedent. And I think it threatens the character and an historic look of the Bay Ridge area. And so I'm on the record as being opposed.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Vincent. Guys are in the room?
What-
Very hard to get, to keep the zoning on Ridge Boulevard down to Shore Road. If it was a one family, it stayed a one family. If it was a two, it's two. This is ridiculous to build 11-story. You know, Mandami thinks this is Manhattan.
All right.
You know, this is.
So we haven't been called on you.
Conservative.
All right, yeah.
Ma'am, thank you very much for your comments, but we have people waiting in order. This gentleman has been waiting to.
Well, I want to thank Vincent because I agree completely with Vincent. I just moved here a year ago. I live on 94th. The subway is way more than 100 feet from your property because I'm between here and the subway and I'm 100 feet away from it. And I retired. I'm a psychologist from Nashville, Tennessee, where it's overbuilt and too many people. And my daughter and son-in-law moved down here. We retired and moved here rather than Florida, to be close to them. Not many people retire and move to New York, I realized. So I'm unusual in that regard. And I would say that they left Atlantic Avenue and Barclay in a 30-story building to move down here where it's peaceful, quiet, and a real last neighborhood of Brooklyn. I don't consider this Brooklyn. I consider this Bay Ridge.
Yep.
I wouldn't even equate the two.
It's like Riverdale.
And so my point is, I hear what you're saying about the parking lot. But cars have to get in and cars have to get out. I don't care what happens to them once they're in there, but getting there, they have to get there to even use the parking lot. And 94th cannot handle the ingress and egress of your parking structure. They can't. There is no way. And I don't care what the city says. I don't care about technicality. This deserves a full-on traffic pattern study. And if that's not done, that's a travesty to this neighborhood, and it will never be forgotten. And I hear what you're saying. You have a slick proposal, your salespeople. You're trying, hold on just a second. You're trying to sell this in an environment where we can't trust government. Nothing you say can, unless it's not in stone, you can change your mind at any point. And I don't know you, you don't know me, but we're living in a context now where we can't trust. And so I think this is setting the wrong precedent. I'm extremely opposed to it. True, I've only lived here a year. I pay $4,000 a month in rent. My daughter pays $4,000 a month in rent, so we pay
Wow.
$8,000 a month in rent to be able to live here, because this is where we want to live. And they are new. Mine is a new build on top of a remodel build with a chiropractor right underneath it. It's a beautiful location right on 94th, very close to the subway. And we love the open environment, that you can actually see the sky, that you can feel the breeze, that you're not taken in by 11-foot story and higher buildings. And that would be a travesty, in my opinion, for Bay Ridge.
Thank you.
Just
Please.
from a timeline perspective, we haven't spoken about that. The disruption to the neighborhood, the first construction timing, what's that timeline look like in your vision?
I would say,
People that just.
Excuse me, ma'am, please. Ma'am?
thank you for your question. We think that the rough timeline is somewhere between 24 to 32 months. With an expected, if there's some sort of delay, it can get up to 36. But again, I'm the general contractor. I'm there every morning, to active projects. You can come and take a look at me every day. I'm there at 7:30.
Yes.
The construction should not take longer than at a max 36 months, but we think it'll be much shorter than that. Build much taller buildings, much quicker than that.
Okay, all right, we have,
Please just raise your hand if you have a comment or a question. There are others, there are other people who are waiting to speak who had, did you finish?
we'll go here and then we'll get back. Okay.
Online.
Suzanne Strano. Suzanne, you should be able to unmute.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I don't know if you can see me though.
No, we could hear you.
Okay, hi everyone. I own 519 94th Street. I'm born and raised in Bay Ridge. I'm raising my family here. I am a retired teacher. I taught at PSIS 104 and approaching 70 on July the 4th. But I'm speaking about my property, and flooding is a major issue. Not only for me at 519, but my neighbors to the left and the right of me. About 4 years ago, the sewers were backed up because they're antiquated sewers, and all our basements were flooded. And our basement was not only flooded, but we had the palmettos coming out of the toilet and of our bathtub. In addition to that, on March 2025, my basement was flooded horribly. And the water was coming from Staples because the parking lot is pitched. And the way they have very poor drainage, that property. So every time my property got flooded, Staples' basement was flooded in addition. So I spoke to the manager there, and also I spoke to corporate. I have everything documented. I have emails. I have videos. I called Justin Brennan's office. My daughter-in-law did. I spoke to the buildings department. This was heartbreaking to me. The water was up to my knees. This was a basement that my husband finished. He fought in the Vietnam War. He died of a heart attack before he could retire. To see my basement destroyed like this, I had everyone there, State Farm, inspectors, everyone. Spoke to the manager. He had corporate sent people down, and they agreed that it was the drainage from Staples that was coming down from them like a waterfall. It went through my neighbor to the left of me's backyard, the right of me, straight into my yard, down the stairs like a waterfall. And I even have State Farm's denial letter saying that this was Staples' fault. Now, in addition to that, I hired an attorney, and my attorney is Feldman, Kramer, and Monaco. On June the 11th, my attorney sent a letter to Staples store manager and also to BWH LLC. I called the attorney again today just to confirm this. My letters were sent, certified return receipt and first class. No one responded. I had $25,000 worth of damage. I am a widow. Okay. In addition, my attorney said, okay, let's ask for $18,472.02 for the
You had a
damages.
question about that.
Now,
All right.
no one answered me. Now, the Staples manager, Jonathan, is a very nice guy.
We have to, yeah.
He went ahead
No.
and he built like
I think
cinder
this,
block,
we need about the proposal.
cinder
Ma'am,
block
do you have,
brick.
excuse me, Suzanne, do you have a question regarding this proposal?
That's me.
I believe, did she send a letter?
Yes.
I believe we did read your letter and I'm very
Yes,
sorry.
my
Yes.
property is going to get flooded.
Right.
Because if Staples was getting flooded and mine, how can you assure me that my property, I'm right there. Okay, there's my neighbor next door to me, she's there on the right of me. And how are you going to tell me my property is not going to get flooded?
Suzanne,
And
would
you're
you
saying
like the
neighbors had no
applicant to
issues.
respond?
Okay, thank you, Suzanne.
We can have the applicant briefly address the concern.
About flooding, I guess.
Yeah, we've heard concerns about flooding earlier in the presentation and discussed it to some extent. And the takeaway from that conversation was that due to changes in the law since the last few years, green roofs and water retention technologies need to be used in new buildings. And as a result, the stormwater runoff that you are experiencing today should be ended with the new building. We also discussed how stormwater will be managed during construction, and we don't anticipate a problem during those several months of construction. So the takeaway is that with the new building, you should not have a problem like you have been experiencing. And we express our regret for your experience recently, and perhaps we can discuss with the community board about how we can be helpful in that regard.
Okay.
Thank you for your question.
We also made a request for information about the sanitary
This-
sewers.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, there's someone here.
The gentleman in the back, please. Well, who's first?
I just have a few questions. I lived in Bay Ridge 71 years, okay, born here, Charlotte Hospital. You're saying there's gonna be 292 rental units? They're gonna be fair market rental units?
A portion of which will be fair market.
I
All right.
thought I heard 82 low income houses.
Well, it's, so the term is income restricted. It, in the presentation, it's referred to as affordable housing. And it's complicated to understand, but you can go on, if you wanted like to see an example of the housing lotteries for the income restricted units, there, you can go on, you can just Google like HPD housing lottery. Yeah, so depending on the agreement with the council member, it's based on the percentage of area median income, which is the formula that's beyond our control, but for example, we were looking at it earlier, 80%, like if you make 80% of the area median income to qualify for an apartment that's set aside for that income, it's between like $75,000 a year and $95,000 a year. And it depends on like if it's a 2-person household or a 3-person household. And then it depends if it's a 1-bedroom or 2-bedroom, and then like the rent is set by that. there's some units that are often set aside for 130% of area median income, which has a low range of like $165,000 a year. So like it's 230,000 if I'm not mistaken. I don't know why I remember this. But I do.
Would there be any, rent stabilized or rent control?
So from the units, which it depends, it's a percentage, so I think it's like roughly 80, we're saying right now, if there were more of the family units in the building. The 80 units would be subject similarly to rent stabilized laws in the sense that like a regular market rate apartment, you pay what you pay, your lease is up, it goes up, however it goes up. Whereas in a rent stabilized unit, that percent increase is based on the votes of the rent guideline boards. So those 80 apartments, 85 apartments, once you get into that apartment, your rent cannot jump the way it can in a market rate apartment.
The other 200 would be fair market.
Yes.
Yeah, I think though, if you take the tax abatement, which I'm assuming you will do that, all the apartments become rent stabilized.
Correct.
After rent. So every apartment in the building will be rent stabilized, although some of them will be at a high rate.
All
right, sorry, we have
you haven't raised your hand. I'm sorry, this is not a question. Just,
We have other questions.
were you not finished? There were other questions.
Has that variance been approved? The variance you're looking for the building height or whatever?
No, that's why we're here to discuss.
Has any of the proposers lived in this area?
Of course. We'd like them to answer, please.
I think you're correct. I read that.
That has nothing to do with this. Ma'am,
I'm sorry, you're out of
you are
order.
speaking out of order. I'm sorry. I don't want to speak.
I was born in South Brooklyn. I grew up coming to Bay Ridge, the Nathan site as a kid. I love Bay Ridge and that's why I'm here. I still come here for dinners all the time. I love Bay Ridge. And I think that, you know, a housing option other than an aged co-op, or I know I keep referring to it, or a 3-unit townhouse would be a welcome opportunity here. And I think that, to your point, by the way, this is the whole point of this, that I speak to people who actually live here and we have an actual conversation. So everything you said, I completely respect and I appreciate it. So I really do think that this building, although there's no restriction that I can put upon it, but I do think that people in Bay Ridge, they want to stay in Bay Ridge. So it's not that this building is going to become some Manhattan building for people to decamp from Manhattan and move to Bay Ridge. I don't think that's the case. I think the vast majority of the renters is going to be a profile of somebody who's looking to downsize out of a home, doesn't want the upkeep anymore. It's not easy to manage a home at an older age. It's a headache. So the people that sell their houses, what's their option to still continue to live in Bay Ridge? What is it? I don't know. For me, there is no real good affordable option to live in. You sell your house, you have to live, I don't know, in some old crummy building when you had your beautiful home that you worked your whole life for. That's why we're trying to build this building. We think that it's for people downsizing from a home to this apartment building. They'll be able to live in an apartment that offers them amenities, offers them a certain lifestyle that they could not receive before.
Do you have any proposed rentals, like the prices of a studio, 1 bedroom or 2-bedroom, anything like that?
That's based off demand at a later date. Again, this project is some time away, so I don't want to start quoting numbers because again, it's hard to believe, but I don't want to tell you something now, and then in 3 years you come to me and you say, "Damn, what the heck happened? You told me that."
I'm sorry for interrupting. There was a 10-page document online on the New York City.
Yeah.
Racial equity report.
I can speak to that.
On that.
I can speak to that racial equity report. I did not include it in our presentation because it's quite a bit of information and, but I think that the rent question is, is fairly straightforward. So if you look at the rent for 80% AMI, these are the 80 to 88 units that we're going to stabilize. For a studio, that's 2,200. For a 2-bedroom, that's 2,900. And the eligible income to achieve those is between 90 and 129,000. 129,000 being a 4-person household. So I guess that could be a two bedroom.
Stabilized money.
Right.
That's a lot of money.
Okay, I'd like to avoid some sidebar conversations, I'm sorry. Actually, just to the point, you don't know market rates, but I was just curious how those affordable ones will be subsidized. We've dealt with other developers who've said that that the market rate units would be subsidizing those affordable ones. So how affordable, without using the city's definition, but how feasible will it be for people to rent units in this building at the market rate? And what happens if that you're not able to, you believe you can rent every unit?
100%. But I'm not sure I exactly understand your full question, to be honest with you.
Well,
I'm sorry.
I just wanted to know, are there additional subsidies for these affordable units, or you are looking at using the market rate units to subsidize them?
Yes, the market rate, the only way we're able to do affordable units is by subsidizing them with market rate units.
Okay.
I mean, that's not a misnomer, that's not a fib, that's not an imagination, that's cold hard facts. It's just completely infeasible to do it otherwise.
Okay, and you are confident that you could rent at whatever market rate it will be, all the units?
Yeah.
Okay.
Very comfortable.
Okay,
All right,
sorry,
so we have another, yeah.
question, your hand was up before.
I guess the other follow-up is that, so you will not seek any city additional subsidies, no HPD, low-cost mortgage or anything, you do not anticipate doing that?
No.
And you're saying that you don't know the market rate rents at the moment?
We underwrote certain rents, but the market can dictate it up, can dictate it down. So you never know. This project is a major project, it's 3 years away. Rents could go up, rents could go down, you know, it all depends on where the market is at that time.
So when
But I
would you
can't
know
tell
that?
you.
When do you think you would know that information?
I say when I would have a shovel in the ground, I would have a very good idea of where we're gonna be rent wise. I think that's a safe assumption.
The city planning made some assumptions in their presentation to the planning commission when this was certified a couple weeks ago. And they thought that studio would go for 2,000 and a two bedroom for 3,200.
That's market.
Market rate?
Market rate. It seems a little low, but
It does seem a little.
It's like affordable.
I mean, I think the concern that we keep having
Mhm.
is that the market rate numbers go up, and then it makes the rest of the community unaffordable around.
Yes.
But I
Because everybody else raises their rent based on what they see on these new projects.
it's a secondary displacement.
I was just gonna say.
Right,
That
that's-
speaks to my question. of
Right,
the
it drives
displacement.
everything else up, and then the neighborhood ironically becomes unaffordable.
I can understand that sentiment, and I'm sensitive to it because, you know, you see it happen in certain areas. But let's be real here, Bay Ridge is not Williamsburg, it's never gonna be Williamsburg, that's not what's gonna happen here, there's not some
Nobody
critical,
wants it to
I know,
be
so exactly. So there's no critical rezoning here happening of a whole entire neighborhood. We're rezoning 39,000 square foot
It's the beginning,
lot.
yeah, it's the beginning, because you have that on 92nd Street, they gotta do 11 stories.
Okay.
So that's two 11-story units within a block of each other, so it's the beginning of the end for our neighborhood. And that's how we view it. How we view it as a community is really important. You guys are business people, there's a lot of profits. Yeah, you don't even come.
Ma'am.
You have to, us,
You have to give her a
Brooklynites,
chance,
us, ones, you know, us lifelong Brooklynites, this is the last thing we want is an 11-story unit here. Just because you can, doesn't mean you should, but that's not what my comments were about. I just wanna make sure I understand something. I'm a homeowner here, my parents, we all own a bunch of properties, my family, okay? So because of the city of Yes, you no longer have to do a traffic study or a sewage study, a sanitary study, is that because of the city of Yes, or that's just because how things are?
The Green Fast Track Initiative was rolled out along with City of Yes, so it's kind of part of that package of initiatives. I think, so what was happening was people were spending a lot of time and money on studies, and it resulted in the same projects. To paraphrase kind of some of the logic, so the city created some criteria. For which if you meet that criteria, you don't have to do those studies, you know, do what we did and, you know, it met it. And it's based on the incremental change between what's allowed and what's proposed. So in this case, it met the criteria to go through the green fast track process, which is like a smaller version of an environmental assessment statement. So for that reason, you know, there are certain studies. I don't know offhand if
No.
if the old criteria
There's
would
lots of,
require a traffic
which
study.
I could summarize if you
I have
want.
that.
Oh, there is one person, sorry, there's one more.
Six-story unit to an 11-story unit. How many more units are there in this project?
About 150.
Okay, so there's that many more bathrooms and showers and everything.
Like
Okay.
loads, talking about
Out
roads.
of being like a good neighbor, that you're coming to our community and you know we flood and you know people's basements get full of sewage and stuff like that. Just out of being a good neighbor, because you are coming, you are disturbing our community in a very big way. Maybe you guys should do an environmental impact study. Maybe you should do a traffic study. Have any of you ever been here when the Verrazano was closed? Do you have any idea what that does to our community? Because if you've never sat through that traffic and you've never experienced that kind of gridlock here, it's a danger. Ambulances can't go anywhere. Fire trucks right there can't go anywhere. So you're adding to that. And then my last point is, you're saying 75 parking spots, okay? How many spots, how many people, how many cars do you think are coming along with this project? Yes, you're putting 75 parking spots, okay, but how many actual cars are coming into our community with the rest of that? It's not gonna just be 75 parking spots. So how many more people are we fighting with for parking? And then you've got the other 11-story building coming, you know, a half a block over. How many more spots? So you guys are really hurting us. And I know you don't care, but we care. This matters to us.
Okay,
This
thank you.
really
We have one
is
other.
special. And if you look around, there's nothing monstrous or obnoxious here. This is an obnoxious scale. 6 stories, okay, not so bad, fits in, blends in. But now you've started something ugly here. You've started something really ugly here. And it's all about profit for you guys. But this is our community. This is where we live. This is a place we love. This is a special, special place. Bay Ridge is not like any place else. This is a special place and it's worth fighting for. So I hope people come out and fight, but you should stick to 6 stories. Just because you can go to 14, just because you make it seem like you're doing us a favor by staying at 11, doesn't make this project right. It's not acceptable. It's not that.
All right, so we have one more.
Thank
We
you very
have
much.
one
We do
more
have one more
online. Okay, Laura, you'll be able to unmute? Laura?
Hi.
Hi.
Thanks for all of this. I feel like this has been informative. I echo a lot of the concerns. I live in Bay Ridge for like 10 years, but not near where this is happening. One of my questions is, do we have any other 11-story buildings? It sounds like there's maybe one going up nearby. I may have missed that in the first couple of minutes of the presentation.
Yes.
Correct. That's 2 blocks north, yeah.
And so that's the only other 11-story building in Bay Ridge?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, right. It's a different project.
Okay, Laura.
Right. No, it's, 11 stories sticks out in a neighborhood where mostly they go to 6. But my question is maybe, I don't know if it's a question or a comment. I think that there's a lot of good, I get that there's a lot of concern around the traffic, around the school impact, around all of these things that it sounds like because of the regulation differences don't need to be studied. I guess my question to the developers is kind of like, based on what you've heard, is there anything that you feel like you want to study or look at or think about differently based on the community feedback that you didn't know coming in, right? Because that's kind of the point of this whole thing.
Well, I think that all of your concerns and all of your points are obviously valid. You guys live here. I think that Nicole has taken notes. She's our environmental impact consultant. She's taken notes on every single concern that you guys have voiced. And we plan on looking into each and every one and incorporating them into our next presentation to the extent that we can. The ones that are, that are feasible and that we can actually look at and easily quantify, then we will look into it. Yes, of course, 100%.
Okay, thank
you, Laura.
I just want to I just want to, I'm sorry, ma'am, I have the floor. I'm sorry, ma'am.
sorry,
Yeah,
you-
yeah, out of order. I just want to add that there were about 15 questions in the chat, most of which deal with scopes, scale, size. We received lots of people from 94th Street who explained they have sewer backups. Fort Hamilton Parkway from 92nd Street to 99th Street. Some of those folks which nearby streets have had history of sewer backups. The sewer there was actually done twice in that corridor, so there were some comments there. And I just want to just share with the committee that most of the comments dealt with the scale of the building and what they say is a narrow street. And it's overwhelming, they feel, on the corridor. I'm just summarizing it, but I will print them out for the committee in the interest of time.
Does Anne have? Anne, is
Thank
your
you.
hand up again?
Yes, a couple of things. Regarding the commercial space. Now, I'm originally from Manhattan, and it's a paradise of overbuilds, right? From very zealous developers. There's a Whole Foods that was added to the corner of where I used to live. And they took out all the residential parking for the trucks. So that's a concern that even if it's not a supermarket, but the commercial retail underneath, if it rezones the parking, which they're already with City of Yes taking out parking spots in the neighborhood and creating more congestion as it is. That's one concern. The other one is sanitation. Now, when you have, let's say, your scale is going to bring in close over 1,000 people, that's going to be sanitation, right? That's going to also clog up the city streets. There is vermin that I have to be concerned about because I already see it on 3rd Avenue and I see it on 4th Avenue and I see it on 5th Avenue as it is. And the last one I thought was interesting is that one of the gentlemen in the blue shirt, keeps referencing that this new state-of-the-art building would bring relief to Bay Ridgeites, that, it would give them more opportunity for housing. How would you guarantee that it's only Bay Ridge residents moving into this building?
Well, there's no guarantee. I just think that's.
There's no guarantee because there's a very high likelihood it's not going to be people from the neighborhood. So that's not a valid thing to bring up. I'm against the height as the scope of this project because it's overwhelming. It should stay within the current zoning.
All right, thank you.
Don't give a reference to say that you're doing this for the people of the community, because it is not.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Okay.
Okay.
I think
that's it. Yeah. Okay.
you were waiting.
Yeah. So as far as the parking goes in the building, is it going to be separate from the resident parking and the commercial, or is it all combined into one? The parking.
Parking is on the subcellar level, and it shares the entrance, but an attendant parking will be the one handling the residences.
So they're gonna be separate,
They're separate at the subcellar level.
and so the resident parking is what, 75 parking spaces or something like that?
Well, right now, for the residences, we
137.
well, it's 15% of the dwelling units, and it's under the City of Yes. We don't.
Well, so we have two things that we're talking about with parking, right? But what is required, which is 75 spaces total, and what we're going to provide, which is closer to 155. And 25 of those will be for the grocery stores. So, you would self-park, you would drive in, park, presumably get your parking validated, by the grocer, and then leave with your groceries without even going outside, right?
25 spaces for the entire supermarket?
Yeah, I mean, really, I was just looking when you were talking about, how that's gonna work. But which grocery stores do have like suburban style?
Super Fresh on 63rd.
Okay, but there are a lot of grocers around. I've been to them, on 4th Avenue and around here that don't have any parking, so we think this is going to be a nice combination for the retailer.
It's going to be impossible.
But then the other 130 spaces are for the residential units, and that's going to be more of a thing where when you're ready to go, you call down, your car is waiting on the side, and you go up. Yeah, that's paid parking. That's
paid parking. One more question for you. If you go along with this supermarket idea, just the idea of trying to pull tractor trailers into something, into a facility or into a loading dock, on a one-way street that is that narrow, you're gonna have to eliminate all those spots, because there's no way that those trucks are gonna be able to get into any kind of space without having that kind of a berth, right?
Truck turning radius, yeah, so
Exactly,
that
good for you.
there would probably need to be some changes. But there's a loading dock also that they're backing into, so then they're off the street,
And that's gonna, that takes a while to do that, because we see that at people.
It does, yes.
And that's gonna create a huge traffic jam there.
Again, the thought is though that maybe not at 4 a.m, but early in the morning before there's, a lot of
I
traffic.
think we have to.
Live right by Newtown. It's 7 and 8 o'clock in the morning. It's never.
We should go about next steps.
People sleep then at 4 in the morning.
We have listened to all of your concerns. This is not the last meeting. There will be another meeting before the public hearing. We are at 2 hours. So we'd like to talk about next steps.
So the next meeting, the committee will meet again on May 7th. And there's been a lot of questions here that have been formulated. We're going to take a look at those questions. Everyone's invited again, kind of in this hybrid format. And then we're going to have a public hearing at the May general board meeting. So that's kind of the process, moving forward. So if you have any,
On the 18th.
the board meeting is on the 18th of May. So we encourage everyone to sign in with emails. We're going to create an email list for everyone who's here. Anyone who's listening, we had about 40 people online as well who attended this meeting. So we will have your email addresses. If you have any questions that you'd like to add or share with the committee, additional comments, we are keeping all of those comments together for the committee to review, and they review every single comment. So we do encourage everyone to look at this as they formulate their advisory opinion to submit to the general board in May.
Well, then
Okay.
I'd like to thank everyone, the committee, the public, Paul, Yuri, Nicole, Daniel, thank you very much for presenting this evening, and we look forward to continuing the discussion. Everyone, have a very good evening.
Thank you all.